They are a woman, aged 40, and a man, aged 62. The woman is an Army private in the Australian Defence Force. The AFP arrested the married couple yesterday morning at their Everton Park home in Brisbane. They have been charged with one count each of preparing for an espionage offence, which carries a maximum penalty of 15 years imprisonment. They will appear before Brisbane Magistrates Court today. The Counter Foreign Interference Task Force, which includes AFP, ASIO and other Commonwealth partners, has dedicated significant resources and capability to Operation Burgazada. The AFP will allege the individuals worked together to access Australian Defence Force material that related to Australia's national security interests. We allege the woman was undertaking non-declared travel to Russia whilst she was on long-term leave from the Australian Defence Force. We allege that while she was in Russia, she instructed her husband, who remained in Australia, on how to log into her official work account from their Brisbane home. We allege her husband would access requested material and would send to his wife in Russia. We allege they sought that information with the intention of providing it to Russian authorities. Whether that information was handed over remains a key focus of our investigation. There are a couple of critical points that I want to make today. This alleged criminality has been disrupted. Currently, no significant compromise has been identified. Our Five Eyes partners and the Australian Government can be confident that the robust partnerships within the Counter Foreign Interference Task Force mean we will continue to identify and disrupt espionage and foreign interference activity. I want to thank the very clever members of the AFP, ASIO and those individuals in the task force for their ingenuity and determination. Finally, I'll also take an opportunity to speak to the public and separately state actors. Firstly, to the Australian public, espionage is not a victimless crime and it is certainly growing. It has the potential to impact on Australia's sovereignty, safety and way of life. It happens in the shadows and the daylight, and I ask Australians to call the National Security Hotline on 1800 123 400 if they feel something does not seem right. Secondly, we know Western democracies, including Australia, are being targeted by state actors. But Australia's intelligence and law enforcement agencies have the laws, capability and tradecraft to identify these spies and those seeking to undermine Australia's interests. So my direct warning is this: we know who you are likely already exposed. You will get a knock on your door and it will be either from someone wearing this patch on their shoulder or from one of our other national security agencies. You will face embarrassment and potentially a very lengthy term of imprisonment. I'll now hand over to the Director General of ASIO, Mike Burgess, to make comments.
Thank you, Reece. ASIO is Australia's spy catcher. It's a responsibility we take extremely seriously. If you're spying in this country, we're looking for you. If you're being spied on in this country, we're looking out for you. I acknowledge the work of the Australian Federal Police and the Counter Foreign Interference Task Force, as well as the other ASIO teams that undertook a lengthy, patient and complex investigation. I also want to commend Defence for its security awareness that led to ASIO and the task force to intervene early and control this operation. This case reflects and demonstrates an effective security culture, not a deficient one. I will make no further comment on this particular case because I appreciate the charges have not been tested in a court and we must respect the presumption of innocence. Instead, I will make 4 general points about the threats facing Australia and ASIO's work to counter them. First, the espionage threat is real. Multiple countries are seeking to steal Australia's secrets. We cannot be naive and we cannot be complacent. Espionage is not some quaint Cold War notion. Espionage damages our economy and degrades our strategic advantage. It has catastrophic real-world consequences. Foreign intelligence services are capable, determined and patient. They play the long game. The problem for them is ASIO does too. And that brings me to my second point. ASIO is on the case. The ASIO Act makes our responsibilities clear. If you're conducting espionage in this country, we will detect you and we will deal with you. Normally, that is through intelligence-led disruptions, but when we can support a prosecution, we will support a prosecution. Third, security is a shared responsibility. The scale and sophistication of this threat facing Australia requires and demands individuals, governments and industries to take security seriously. I know Defence understands this. Every day they work with my organisation ASIO to protect our military capabilities and secure Australia's secrets. Fourth and finally, I want to speak directly to the operatives of Russian intelligence services. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the Petrov defections. 2 Russian spies gave ASIO and our closest allies the name of Russian assets in Western countries. If you want to share your secrets, please reach out. ASIO is always listening. Thank you. We're happy to take your questions.
Gentlemen, just on the sleeper agents themselves, can I ask, did they arrive in Australia together? Were they married here in Australia or elsewhere? How long have they been in Australia, and how long has the Russian woman been in the ADF?
So they've both been in Australia for more than 10 years. The woman obtained Australian citizenship in 2016 and her husband obtained Australian citizenship in 2020. And she has been employed in the Australian Army, in the Australian Defence Force for several years as an information systems technician.
How was this missed in vetting?
Well, that's a matter that part of our investigation with ASIO.
I can jump in there, Reece. I'd respectfully suggest that vetting is not a solution that stops problems, because it depends on what you say. How is it missed? If you meet the requirements to get a security clearance, you'll get a security clearance. But that doesn't mean to say the security journey stops at this point. And in this case, because of defence and security awareness, ASIO and the task force and then the AFP were able to intervene and control this operation.
How did you become aware of the operation?
All I will say is because of defence awareness.
Do you believe that the woman entered the ADF with a specific intention of committing espionage?
That's a part of the investigation that we will be looking at within the task force.
And can you be more specific about the kind of material that they have obtained?
Well, as I said, no significant compromise has been identified at this stage.
Commissioner, how was someone with a security clearance able to travel to Russia without your knowledge, or were you aware and actively tracking her?
Well, that's part of, again, the investigation that we're going through. At this stage, there was some misleading on her behalf of where she was allegedly at and what country. And so it was really the work of the task force that were able to identify what actually had occurred.
Can you say a little bit more about the nature of the information that she was accessing in the system? You say there wasn't any significant compromise. Clearly, we'd like to know if there was any risk to any personnel from the information that she was gaining, or any risk to any operations from the information that she was getting.
Yeah, that does form part of the investigation as well. At this stage currently, as I said, no significant compromise. However, we're going to go down every avenue of inquiry.
Did they retain their Russian citizenship?
What I'm able to say is they had Russian passports.
Were they married in Australia? Did they come here married?
Yeah, that's something I'd probably have to get back to you on that one.
But do you allege, just going back to my initial question, do you allege that they came here more than 10 years ago with the intent of committing this, or do you think that they, and perhaps the Director General here is better qualified to answer, do you think that they were recruited by the FSB in more recent times?
So as the Commissioner has said, obviously when they've arrived in this country, all that details is still subject to further investigation and ongoing investigation. We have some information, but obviously we're still together piecing that in terms of when did this start, when did that journey start. The other thing I'll reinforce is because of Defence's awareness, it allowed us to intervene early and control the operation.
Do you suspect that anyone else in Australia is involved in this?
At this stage, the investigation hasn't identified any other individuals, but that's not to mean that there isn't. And as you know, often when we make an arrest, it's the beginning of the investigation.
Can you say whether they were involved with any Russian diplomats in Australia?
Well, again, at this stage, that's something that we'll be looking at as well.
How can Russian citizens be able to access sensitive information or any person with other citizenships outside of Five Eyes, for example? Is there going to be a review about who can access what now?
So security clearance have specific requirements on them, including being an Australian citizen, of course, people's cultural background and heritage and when they came to this country, and do they have a checkable background, and all those things are required for security decisions. That's part of the investigation, and internally we'll work with Defence to work through what's the teachable moment here, if there are any.
When you say you were able to control the operation after Defence told you, did that involve feeding misinformation, false information to this person who then passed on to the Russian authorities?
You'd appreciate, Andrew, I wouldn't go into the details of how we do that. Obviously, you picked up on the key point. Once we knew, we were able to control this to allow the task force to do the investigation and the police to work through what they needed to do.
Is it right to assume that it was pretty sloppy of her to be out of the country and getting someone to access her account? Is that what sort of tipped you off to this?
I'm not going to comment on what tipped us off to
When
this.
did
Can you say anything about whether you cooperated with Five Eyes allies in checking on what happened to you?
I think what's important to know is that back in 2019, the AFP, we requested, and I did personally with Director Ray from the Bureau, as to we were setting up our espionage task force with ASIO, and he was generous enough to send out his people to help us identify what we would face as far as some of the challenges, given how do you wash national security intelligence across into evidence and then get a successful prosecution. I think the success that we've had within the task force already has sort of spoken for itself, but also the fact that the UK then did reach out and say, can we get your advice? We're setting up our task force, and that happened this year and late last year, as far as us actually assisting them in providing that advice. So it sort of shows you the maturity that we have within the task force.
Commissioner, you said earlier that you weren't sure whether any information had been passed on, so you can't actually be sure that there's been no breach, can you? And secondly, is there a Ukraine link to any of this?
I think what's clear, and this is where the legislation, we're using this for the first time, again, it's acts in preparation for an espionage offence. So we're showing that certainly there's an intent to share that information. Whether or not that has occurred, that will form further to our investigation avenues of inquiry. And for example, the 15-year offence then is upgraded to a 25 years to life, depending on what we discover further.
And Ukraine, is it a Ukraine link?
Oh, look, I'm not going to go into that. I mean, again, these are different avenues of inquiry that we'll have.
You told us of the direct actions, but what can you tell us of the purpose that you believe in that engagement?
Espionage is espionage, and a wide range of sensitive information in defence that would be of interest to the Russian intelligence services.
Has the ADF indicated whether or not they will be bolstering their own security systems in wake of this?
I think with any internal matter, even ourselves, we always are looking at our systems, our processes, and I have no doubt that we'll be able to assist with that as well. And that again would be part of an outcome of this investigation.
When did you become aware of this breach?
I don't want to go into that again, because it's that's something again operationally that I've been asked not to disclose at this stage. We'll try and share as much as we can, but we don't want to go into certain specifics at this stage.
Do you know how they were recruited? Sorry.
Again, we have a great deal of intelligence on this matter, but the investigation is ongoing, so and because the matter is now charges have been laid, we won't comment further at this stage, and that's for the AFP in future, should they need to.
On the documents, how current were they? So it mentioned that she travelled in 2023, I believe it was. So how current were the documents that she accessed? Were they from 2023, previous?
I can't go into specifics again of that material. I'll try and help you out as much as I can, but again, I have to take my advice from the investigation team who, at this stage, don't want to have that disclosed.
DG, is this linked to any of the hyper-spy cases you've spoken about in your annual pre-assessment? Can we draw a connection between some of the spies that have expelled in this case?
I think the only thing I'd say at this stage is I've been saying ever since I've been Director General Security, the espionage threat is real. This is another example of acts in preparation of espionage and potentially espionage. This is a real thing, comes from multiple countries. It's just another example of what we've been talking about.
Last question.
Are you aware, again, I'm just, some of the basics you haven't quite been precise on. I know it might be difficult. Did they come to Australia together or separately? And exactly how long was she in the ADF?
Exactly how long she's in the ADF is a matter for ADF. At this stage, you know, they've been here for 10 years as a couple. And again, these are other things we're looking at, a whole range of avenues of inquiry. I think also...
Did they come together or separately?
Well, that's something, again, that, you know, I'm not going to disclose whether they're on the same flight or, you know, whatever. That forms part of our overall investigation. I think the other thing, just going back to the legislation, which is important, we have to demonstrate that there's, you know, a clear evidence link to a foreign principal, and that's why we've done the initial charge that we have.
Okay, thanks folks. Mark and I'll get back.